All right. Gonna give a couple minutes and see if some people come on. We're recording this, so we're super excited for this conversation. It's gonna be awesome. I think there's a couple people that may join in today. I just want to make sure I kind of like get this close to me. I'm excited about this. All right, we got Maritza in the house. I'm going to share my screen. Perfect. Sweet. All right, guys, so I'm going to give hopefully you can hear me. Can you please just comment that you can hear me loud and clear on the chat box, please? So I know that you are good to go. Oops, I didn't want to make this that big. There we go. I can hear you. Perfect. Thank you, Katie. Presenter's view. Hopefully you can see this that way. All right. Thank you, Maritza. Yes, we're going to get started in probably like a minute or so. I think there's a lot of people that can't make it around this time. They asked me for the recording. So regardless, I think this is going to be a great topic of conversation. So I'm very, very excited about it. So I have the camera here, but I'm going to be looking at the screen over on this side. We have Leandro coming in as well. Sweet. Awesome. Super excited to have you guys on here. So we're going to get started in about a minute. You guys are going to be commenting on the chat box. So make sure that you get ready to type in some answers. I'm just going to ask you some things that you may be dealing with sometimes. So I just want to make sure that we help you. So 30 more seconds and we'll get started. And then maybe some people may be trickling in after. So, all right. Let's see. I'm going to presenter's view. Okay, that's exactly the way I wanted to show it to you guys. Perfect. All right, so let's get started. We only have 3 people in here. I know there's at least 5 of them that wanted to actually catch this, but couldn't make it. So let's get right into it today. First of all, welcome back. I'm trying to increase the exposure of, or the amount of like people that come into this group calls, because I want them to turn into like more of like a community Q&A as a way to be able to connect with a lot of you guys into the process. And so we can kind of like all integrate everything. So this is obviously a process that is one-on-one, but of course I want to make sure that in some way we can kind of help each other out in any kind of way possible. So I was going to talk a lot about like, ins and outs of MyFitnessPal and proper tracking and all those different things. But I realized that this is literally the week before Thanksgiving. So I figured that we kind of like would go on to like and looking into like an in-depth view on overeating. So what happens to your body when you consume a high calorie meal? How does your body respond to it? And all those different things that are really, really interesting. And in fact, every time that I talk about this, I do a lot of research into it. So I can kind of like understand obviously the basics of metabolism, which is really fascinating. And I'm going to be even sharing some research with you guys. I'm not going to get too nerded, I'm not going to get too nerdy about it, but I want to make sure that I still, kind of go over some important kind of like factors and areas that I think are going to be important for us to cover. So again, today we're going to be looking at doing, I call this presentation an in-depth view on overeating holiday edition, because obviously it's what's coming up next. So I do have a question for you guys, and I want to make sure that you answer, the 3 of you on here present. What are your biggest fears around the holidays? So I want to make sure that you type in the comment box, the 3 of you guys in here. What are some of your biggest fears? It could be obviously around Thanksgiving or Christmas, or what are the kind of the things that kind of scare you a little bit? So I'm going to give you a few seconds or so you can kind of like type in your answers, and we go from there. I have talked to you guys individually about some of this stuff, so I know that you have some fears about it. So I'll wait to see if I can kind of like hear some of the answers, and I will also tell you mine. Fears, things that scare you. Oh, there we go. Whoops, gotta help myself. No fears. Nobody's scared of anything. You're not scared of eating too much. Eating too much, the exposure, access to foods with high sugars, etc. Yep, those are gonna be common ones that I typically kind of like tend to see. So with that, of course, those are common fears that typically happens is just simply eating too much. But what really happens to your body when you eat too much? What happens if you consume a 5,000 calorie day? Like that's the typical question that we typically get to, like, we ask. So I'm going to explain that to you guys in like more in depth, which is going to be super, super interesting. But before we get into that, it's really interesting to start to look into really what happens, as a population in the US and around the world and different kinds of areas. And this is a really interesting study that they did in Japan, United States, and Germany. So they looked at obviously what are like the biggest kind of like weight changes like in percentages around these different countries, around different areas. And it's really interesting because you typically tend to see like the yellow line is going to be the United States, the blue line is going to be Germany, and then the green line is going to be Japan. So you can see, for example, that during Thanksgiving, which typically Germany doesn't celebrate, they don't really have a massive spike, but United States typically tend to see a spike in weight. But then obviously Germany celebrates Christmas just like the United States, and that's when we tend to see obviously the biggest kind of weight increases. And it sounds like Germany kind of like wins it all together. I think they probably drink way too much beer, which is obviously something that kind of makes a big difference into that. But then after that, typically those numbers tend to kind of like drop. In Japan, there's something known as like the Golden Week. And you can see obviously around May where they typically, it sounds like they probably consume a lot of food. And obviously around Easter as well, where January, I guess like they celebrated a lot more than the United States. So they tend to obviously see sort of a surge. But there's obviously some of these like different kind of trends that it typically tend to exist around this type of areas. Gotta make sure I admit people in here that kind of came in a little bit later. So those are like some of the main areas like or one of the main kind of like changes that we typically tend to see around the holidays. And you can see it's not just in the US. We tend to obviously some of this big kind of changes in weight, but we also tend to see it in times in which obviously in other countries that it's actually happening the same exact thing. So you guys know obviously there are changes, but typically most people or when somebody looks at this, they say, okay, it's because they had a big meal in the holiday or in Thanksgiving, and it's not a result of that. And what you guys are gonna learn today about the holidays is that weight gain that occurs after the holidays is related not because of one meal, but because of the decisions that you're making after that one meal. And we're gonna talk about the biggest mistakes that people sometimes are making around this time of the year and how you can actually combat some of those different areas. Now, let's actually look at what a typical meal is going to have. Let me see if I can. Okay, there we go. So how many calories is in a Thanksgiving dinner? So this is obviously something that it has been like, we're like looking into the amount of calories that a typical kind of like meal on Thanksgiving is going to have. And this is obviously the typical American one. So depending on a typical calorie day for most people is going to be anywhere between 1,800 to like 2,500 calories. A typical caloric load of a Thanksgiving dinner can be up to 1,000 and sometimes can actually go up to like 4,500 calories in one single day. And you can obviously see kind of like the changes, like 350 calories from a little pumpkin pie, 300 calories from the sweet potato casserole, 300 calories for the dinner roast, which is actually surprising, turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, the wine, which some people are going to have a little bit more than others, and then green bean casserole and cranberry sauce. So of course, like all these different things start to add up. And you may say, well, I actually didn't really do too bad during Thanksgiving, but at the end of the day, they're very high calorie or calorie dense foods into that. And this is not necessarily to show you to scare you, but just so you understand that a lot of times, even when you may think that you're consuming like, oh, I did actually pretty well during Thanksgiving, it's very, very hard to be able to control it. As an example, this weekend we had a brunch, and obviously this was not a Thanksgiving meal, but I had like an egg Benedict, very small meal, something simple, a couple of mimosas, and this little thing literally racked up to actually be closer to 1,200 calories without me even actually noticing that. Like when I would have a normal kind of like meal that I was consuming at home, like I would feel as full as I did probably with that, and like, meal, not necessarily too much, comfortably full. And I would never actually expect to have as many calories in a meal that I'm making at home compared to something that is made at a restaurant. So this is just something to kind of give you some perspective. Now, This is where it gets kind of like interesting. There are 4 things that happens to your body when you overeat. And I want to make sure that today we kind of go over those things in depth. The number one thing that happens is going to be a process known as thermogenesis. I'm going to break this down all individually. So I want to make sure that I explain all those things to you. The second thing that happens is glycogen storage, which is liver and muscles. I'm going to explain what glycogen is in a minute. Some of the extra calories you consume can be converted to fat. So that's definitely something that can happen as a result. And some can also, and obviously the excretion of obviously like your poop and your whatever, like, you're doing as far as like urination, all that kind of stuff like that. Also that weighs. So all those different things all together account for weight, essentially. So those are things that I'm going to be sort of like explaining a little bit on today. Okay. So let's kind of like go over like the first thing, which is going to be thermogenesis. I haven't talked about this in the past, but essentially what this is when you consume foods, your body requires like a specific amount of energy to be able to digest the food that you're consuming. And this is known as diet-induced thermogenesis, which again is going to be the amount of energy your body needs to pull from that food to be able to digest it, break it down, and absorb it into your bloodstream. That can actually be as high as 10% of your overall calorie expenditure. So, or calorie needs. So what does that exactly mean? That means that if you are consuming about 2,000 calories a day, almost up to 200 calories out of those 2,000, your body is actually using to absorb and to digest all the foods that you're consuming. Now, this depends also on the type of macronutrient. For example, fat provides 9 calories per gram, but the amount of calories that it is required to be able to digest it is only 0 to 3%. Very, very small. Carbohydrates, it's about 5 to 10%, but look at protein. Protein, the amount of calories the body requires to be able to digest protein is 20 to 30% out of that. Which means, so what does that tell you? A diet high in protein is going to not only increase the amount of energy that you're kind of burning through by digesting it, but at the same time, it's also going to keep you fuller for longer. That's why one of the recommendations that I always kind of give you guys is making sure that every single meal that you're consuming contains a good amount of protein. So overall, what I'm trying to say in here, that one of the fate, when you're looking at the fate of your excess calories that you're consuming, let's say you consumed in Thanksgiving a 4,000 calorie meal, a good amount of those calories, up to almost like up to 10%, a 4,000 calorie meal, that means like 400 calories, your body's actually just using to literally break down all that amount of food that you're consuming. It requires energy to be able to break down like the sweet potato casserole, like the pecan pie, the turkey. Like that's why you get so sleepy after. It's not necessarily because of the tryptophan or whatever they talk about the turkey. It's because your body's like bringing in so much blood through your digestive system to be able to break all this stuff down. So that's one of the things that typically happens when it comes down to that. Now, the second thing, which is very interesting and is very important, is glycogen. If you guys have ever looked at or stepped on a scale after a holiday meal, you probably had a massive heart attack. Okay, I literally just had a client coming back from Mexico, male guy, and he literally said, I gained 10 pounds. I literally stepped on the scale after my 4-day trip to Mexico, and I gained 10 pounds. Can you please reassure me that I didn't gain 10 pounds of fat? And I said, no, you did not gain 10 pounds of fat. A lot of times you guys think that weight just only reflects the amount of fat that your body holds on to, and it's not that. Please stop looking at weight like it's just only the amount of fat your body's carrying. Glycogen is the way that your body carries carbohydrates in your body, and you can store it in 2 different places. You can store it in your liver, and you can store it in your muscles. As a matter of fact, when you consume a higher calorie meal, your body doesn't predominantly choose to turn them into fats. It actually wants to store them as carbohydrates until your glycogen storage, think about that as a tank, literally like a gas tank, until those levels are super completely full and filled up and saturated. And that usually doesn't happen that quickly. It happens after a high calorie meal. I'm literally going to show you a really good example of a study that they did where they overfed a few people on purpose to understand exactly what happened as a result of that. But when you consume a high calorie meal, and particularly carbohydrates, you would increase the weight of your liver and your muscle. You're not increasing the amount of fat that you're consuming. You're simply increasing the amount of liver weight and the amount of glycogen weight. This is also something important to consider. For each gram of glycogen in your liver, you're actually holding on 2.4 grams of water. So literally for every single gram of glycogen in there, almost like 3 times is kind of like hold on to water. So you're gaining like weight just from the water and the carbohydrates that you're consuming. Like I can literally attest for this by just literally telling you, like if you have a cup of rice and you have like 1 liter of water right now, and you actually step on the scale an hour later, you're going to be 2 pounds heavier. You didn't gain 2 pounds of fat. You just simply gained 2 pounds of water and glycogen storage. Keep that in mind, and your muscles can hold on to a lot more. I'm not going to get too much into the details of all this as far as like exactly how much, but you can literally be holding on to like 2 to 3 pounds of carbohydrates and water at any given point, especially when you're overeating. And this is why a lot of times you're going to see some of these massive fluctuations. Why do you think keto is effective? Let me actually tell you this question. Like, why do you think keto is effective for many people and it becomes such a trendy topic? Because keto is one type of diet in which you're depleting carbohydrate storage. You're lowering your carbs low enough in which your water, it's actually, when you deplete your glycogen storage, imagine your muscles and your liver are kind of like lowering its amount. Guess what's also going with that? An insane amount of water. So when you drop all that, you're immediately dropping an insane amount of water as well, water weight. And because of that, you have that rapid weight loss. Now, when you're consuming a normal carbohydrate diet, most people say, and most people think like, well, obviously weight loss typically doesn't happen as quickly. Well, of course, because you're not losing as much water as you do when you're actually on a ketogenic diet. So I wanted to actually kind of like create this example because most people understand and get excited about the big drop on the scale, when in reality, that's nothing to be excited about, because technically you're dehydrating yourself or you're losing a lot of body water. This is why many people that jump on keto diets, they experience constipation and they experience a lot of like headaches and stuff like that, because they're depleting electrolyte balance and they're depleting water. So essentially, they're having like imbalances in overall amounts of like, water in their body, which is not ideal. So I just wanted to give you this example so you understand. Like literally, if you cut out all carbs for 5 days in a row, your weight is going to drop. But your fat intake or your overall fat, like, requirements, or the amount of fat that your body is actually carrying, is not going to go that low. Let me actually tell you or explain to you how this actually happened and how they looked into this. So they look at, this is obviously not a super strong study, but I wanted to kind of give you this because it was extremely impactful. They looked at 3 collegiate athletes. So of course, these are male, so obviously different than women and all that, whatever you want to say, of course. But at the same time, it was really impactful, the results that they found. And then what they did is they depleted their glycogen storage, which means like they probably put them to exercise, and essentially they kind of cut a lot of their carbs for like 3 days. So of course they were fully depleted. And then they have them consume 3,500 to 5,000 calories, mostly coming from carbs. Hear this out. They were consuming anywhere between 760 and 900 grams of carbs every single day for 7 days. And the first day, what they found was glycogen was completely refilled. So obviously their glycogen storage actually increased. The second day, they only gain about 30 grams of fat. You know what 30 grams of fat is? 30 grams of fat is probably 0.001 pounds. The third day, they gain 45 grams of fat. And by the end of the week, these guys actually gain about 10 pounds overall altogether, out of which only 2.5 were actually fat. Granted, they were consuming almost like 760 to 900 grams of carbohydrates every single day. This is not to say that carbohydrates obviously kind of contribute to fat storage, but look at the amount of calories that we're consuming and look like comparatively with the amount of like actual fat that they gain in the process. Of course, they jump on the scale, they stepped on the scale and they gain 10 pounds of like weight. So if you, obviously a person that did this, obviously after a meal, you're going to freak out because you're going to think that you gained 10 pounds of fat. You didn't. You gain probably a very small percentage of fat and a higher percentage, obviously, of glycogen storage in the amount of water that you're also holding on. So please, as you approach the holidays, do not look at the weight at face value, meaning do not just simply look at the number and think, holy crap, I gained 10 pounds overnight. Because you and I both know it doesn't really mean that you gain 10 pounds of fat. So the bottom line when it comes down to this specific area is when you consume carbs, first of all, specifically when you consume a higher calorie meal, which is typically, I talk a lot about carbs because most Thanksgiving meals and all that kind of stuff, they're predominantly higher in carbohydrates compared to overall fat intake. So, but first, your body would first burn them as energy or heat whenever it needs it. And the second part is going to happen. It's going to store them as glycogen in your liver and your muscles. And with that, a lot of water is going to be held onto. And when those stores are full, your body can make fat out of carbohydrates, but your body's not predominantly liking to, he doesn't really like to do that particularly. But this is where really it kind of like where the weight happens over the holidays. It doesn't happen because you ate one like high calorie meal or one high calorie day. It happens because of the decisions that you continue to make after the holidays because you just simply said, oh, I already screwed it up, so I might as well, this is a typical thing, I might as well just wait until whatever, you know? Or, and I'm going to talk about some of those mistakes in just a minute, like, you know, simply people like would restrict and they enter into a binge and restrict cycle that is never ending. So hopefully that gives you a perspective and it gives you an idea on, let me actually kind of like set somebody in here. That gives you a better idea on really what happens to your body. So you know, guys, that the calories that you're consuming, they're not automatically being added to your love handles or your belly. They're simply being stored in places in your body that they need it. And because of that, your weight is probably going to fluctuate. Keep that in mind, okay? Let's move on. Now, the other part too, where obviously you need to understand too, is that water is the food in itself carries weight. And a lot of the food that you consume can turn into poop. A lot of the water that you're consuming or a lot of the fluids that you're consuming turns into obviously a full bladder that obviously kind of carries weight. About half a pound of urine is usually secreted in the morning after obviously literally after an overnight when you were sleeping. And you can actually carry as much as like 1 to 2 pounds of poop at any given morning. And this is obviously an average person after consuming an average amount of calories. Imagine after a high calorie meal. And if you don't believe me, and this might sound gross and all, but literally go to the bathroom, weigh yourself, go to the bathroom, and then weigh yourself after. And I bet money that you're probably going to see a change. I've seen it as high as like 2 pounds or so in 1 minute. So if you wanted to drop 2 pounds in literally like 10 minutes, that's exactly how you can do it. Again, I'm being like completely like joking, and I'm not necessarily joking. I'm just being sarcastic about it, but that's literally like something that gives you an understanding that because the amount of food that you carry, it kind of holds weight to it as well. There's obviously some of it that is going to turn into that. Okay. Now, a lot of times that we talk about trigger foods and sometimes losing control over them. And let me ask you a question, and you can obviously completely kind of like comment on there. What is a trigger food for you? And I literally want you to comment on the chat box right now. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of you guys. What is a trigger food for you? For me, for example, it's going to be either pizza or chocolate chip cookies. When I see them, I lose my shit. Like literally, it's crazy. Katie says chips and ice cream. Let's see. Maritza says desserts. What kind of desserts, Maritza? Rafa says tres leches. Dude, that's definitely a good one for me. Maritza says all of it. Betsy says chocolate cake. Leandro, French fries. Rafael, tiramisu. Those are really good ones. So those are trigger foods for you. So when you see them, obviously you become attracted to them because you're connecting them to a really positive experience with you. When is the last time you saw a bowl of broccoli and felt a connection and excitement and you were like, oh my God, like this brings me back so many really great memories? Never. It never happens. But when you see all these different foods, it actually kind of creates a chemical reaction in your body that creates excitement and emotion, all these different things like that too. And when you consume it, it lights parts of your brain that also create that satisfaction. It makes you happy. It like releases serotonin in your body and all these different things. Now, these trigger foods a lot of times are are really kind of causing a lot of like lack of control over your eating and causing a lot of times like binging because of the fact that you restrict and you prohibit yourself from eating them too much and you wait for the special occasions to consume them. So what I want you guys to do, and I'm going to give you guys a quick, I'm going to call it like a quick challenge for you, is all these foods that you consume or that you literally kind of put in there. I want you to find a way to, in moderation, consume them and fit them into your overall calories or your overall like goals in this week that is coming up. So yes, I am telling you. So for example, like for Rafa, look into obviously kind of having your tres leches, but of course find the opportunity and a way to fit it into obviously what we kind of like discussed. You're going to kind of stay in there. So Betsy, for example, is going to be a chocolate cake. Now, am I saying here to have like a little, like a massive piece of chocolate cake? No, I'm simply telling you to have a small little piece of chocolate cake. Obviously, literally, I'm telling you to go buy it, small little thing, and simply have it and enjoy it and tell yourself, this is just chocolate cake. It's not going to do anything bad to me. Because when you start to incorporate some of these foods in moderation and you don't necessarily restrict yourself for special occasions, you're going to stop to obviously see them as prohibited foods in special occasions or social events. And simply when you have it, you're not going to be able to stop having them when it comes down to that. It's simply kind of creating a better relationship with it. The same thing with French fries, the same thing with desserts for Maritza. It's not necessarily saying like you need to include them every single day, but stop restricting yourself, thinking them that they're actual bad foods or they're going to be like something that is going to like make or break or completely destroy all your progress that you're making because you had one. And I proved that, or I talked about this the other day because I went to Starbucks and I had this really nice chocolate chip and I enjoyed it without guilt, and I absolutely love it. Okay, so a lot of times trigger foods are there. They make you lose control because you're restricting them so much. And the moment that you have them, it's like, oh my God, this is like drugs. I'm going to get high on this as much as I can because I never know when this is going to happen again. So stop looking at them like it's a drug and start looking at them for what it actually is. It's sugar and carbs for most of the different things that you guys mentioned in there. That's all. Of course, it's calorie dense. So smaller species or smaller spaces are going to like literally rack up a good amount of calories, but that's all. You can control how much you're having. And that's going to be like the main thing that I feel like it's going to be help you in the process. Okay. Now, there are common mistakes that people make around their holidays in nutrition. And I wanted to kind of go over those. Like, I think I put together 4 or 5 different mistakes that a lot of people are making right now, so you can avoid them. So mistake number one is going to be working out to earn your calories. That is not necessarily a great kind of mentality that you're going to go and work out because you're like, oh my God, like I'm going to eat so much tonight. Now, granted, I'm not going to tell you in here that that's actually a bad thing to do because we talked about this you guys, and we talked about this one-on-one, is the fact that obviously increasing your energy expenditure, which is the amount of calories your body's using for energy, for moving and exercise and stuff like that. When you increase that, obviously that's going to offset the amount of calories that you're consuming daily. What I want you to start to think about is not necessarily like looking at it as a punishment or as if I don't do this, I won't be able to eat as much. Because we already kind of explained the fact that if you eat too much or more than your body is burning on a single day, you're not gaining an insane amount of fat. In fact, barely any on one specific day. But obviously don't look at that day as a day in which you're going to be like, okay, like this is a day when I'm going to like work out as hard as I can because I am going to eat so much tonight. If you want to work out, I work out on Thanksgiving days because I'm trying to obviously offset the amount of calories that we'll be consuming, but not necessarily as a punishment, but something that actually makes me feel good. I'm excited. I wake up. It's kind of like a Saturday morning for me. So that's exactly why I do it. And I do CrossFit as well. So they typically do fun workouts like turkey workouts and whatever they call them. And I think it's fun, so it's something else like to kind of like consider when it comes down to that. Okay. So that's not mistake number one. Mistake number two, fasting all day to save all your calories for the big meal. And there's a couple of you guys in here that have done that before. And I know you guys know who you are. So that's not necessarily a bad strategy. The problem is that it leads to that binge and restrict cycle. That is something that I talk about all the time. When you restrict yourself for an entire day, your emotional brain kicks in. And by the time that you get to that specific kind of like, meal or whatever it is, you're going to lose control because your body's starving, it's asking for energy, and you're simply not. And because of the fact that mentally you're thinking, oh, like I didn't really have anything today, so I can probably just kind of like completely lose it. Believe it or not, when you create more balance throughout a day, for example, like Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever it is, you're going to automatically eat less in that specific meal and have more balance over your overall calorie intake. And then the part of it that we'll talk about the strategies for the holidays, we'll go over a few different things that I think are important for us to cover. But try to avoid the whole fasting thing and trying to kind of save all your calories for later, especially if you don't ever do that. Because again, it creates a really crazy imbalance. And at the same time, it makes you literally get to a point where it's uncomfortably like full. Like you get to a point that is just not ideal altogether. Number 3, restricting yourself or people like restricting themselves the next day or week to offset the weight gain. So you lost it, you actually had a massive like Thanksgiving meal or a Christmas meal or whatever it is, even like maybe like a holiday party that you went for your office and whatnot. And then what happens? You stepped on the scale the next day, which I don't recommend people to do if it's going to kind of create so much like havoc and like mentally it's going to like, mess you up. And you're like, oh my God, I gained 10 pounds or 8 pounds overnight. I now need to like restrict myself. And they start to like cut out their calories. They consume like 800 calories a day. They do all these different things, which is actually what leads to the massive weight gain that people experience throughout the holidays. Because here's the reality. When you restrict yourself too much, you think you're restricting yourself too much, but then when you lose control, you're going to binge, you're going to consume more calories than what you need, and you're going to end up in a worse place overall and altogether. And we'll talk about how you can avoid this mistake. But the key thing here is do not restrict yourself the next day. Just treat it as a normal day and move on. That is a key thing. We have had this conversation a lot, and Maritza, for example, is a great person that she struggled with this a long time. And now it's like, okay, I ate a lot, not a big deal. I'm going to get over this fact and I'm just going to move on with my life and I'm going to continue to apply my habits. And that's exactly how things actually happen positively. Mistake number 4, thinking that the weight that you gained was fat. And we talked about this, so I'm not going to spend too much time into this. No. All the weight that you may have gained over like one holiday meal or because you went, and this actually applies to a lot of times you go to restaurants, by the way. This not only applies to holidays, like the weight that you gain from one massive meal in a restaurant, whatever may be the case, it's not necessarily, or it did not necessarily happen because of the fact that you ate like a big meal. You didn't gain a bunch of fat just because of one single meal. So keep that in mind. Now, what are some of the strategies that we can kind of establish to navigate the holidays without guilt? We're getting into that time of the month or like the time of like the year in which that obviously kind of comes. And there's a lot of triggers for you guys that are going to happen. For example, if you work, well, of course, like with COVID, things are starting to shut down again. And there's a lot of different things happening. So this may be a little bit different. But if you work in an office, like there's like the holiday party, there's like people bringing in the desserts, there's people bringing in like the leftovers and all these different things. So we're going to talk through some strategies and some of the stuff that you can do. So number 1, be aware of what you're eating. So this is something that I like to kind of like teach to all of you guys and all of my clients when it comes down to holiday eating. As you're approaching those days in which you're going to be consuming more calories than what you typically do, is doing self-checks with yourself. Asking yourself every so often, I call them checkpoints. Asking yourself, okay, I just ate the first meal. On a scale of 1 to 10, how hungry I am right now. Seriously, like Andrea, seriously, dude, like ask yourself how hungry you are. Like, dude, I'm like an 8. Like I'm pretty full. I'm not like uncomfortably full, but I'm pretty full. Do I need to have a second plate of food? I actually don't feel like I need to. Then stop. Right? So like you don't have to eat just simply because food is there. That obviously kind of comes down to the whole triggering and food. So when you're approaching a big table, like be aware of what's present, choose the things that you love, choose the things that you like. Obviously don't fill out the plate to actually turn into a mountain where you're not going to be able to do this. I've done that before many times. And simply enjoy what you're consuming, but do those checkpoints and ask yourself, am I too hungry right now? Oh, but I'm too full and there's still dessert left. Well, sure, you may actually continue to have that, but at the same time, you're just simply getting to a point where you're eating to feel uncomfortably full just simply because you want to taste the dessert, or you want to have the dessert. So plan ahead and be aware of what you're consuming. Okay, that's going to be key. The second thing is focus on 3 components that are important: protein, fiber, and water. Specifically, even when we're talking about obviously trying not to fast all day long, like one of the things I tell a lot of my clients is like, hey, if you know for a fact you're going to be consuming a crazy amount of calories, specifically coming from carbohydrates at night, then focus on eating a lot more protein throughout the day. So obviously kind of like having like higher protein meals, like maybe like a nice little salad with like, chicken or tuna or fish or protein, making sure you're staying properly hydrated throughout the day as well. Like those are going to be key things that you should probably kind of like approach it. And again, this is going to be applied to like if you have a holiday party, if you actually know you're going to be going to like a higher like, calorie restaurant, all these different things still apply: protein, fiber, and water. So it's another really good, important recommendation. Limit your fat and your alcohol, specifically alcohol. I literally did an entire live about this on the effect of alcohol that it has on your body composition. And the fact that when you drink one single drink, that can be equivalent as 1 cup of rice or 1 tablespoon of oil. That can be a 6-ounce pour of wine. That could be a 12-ounce beer. That could be a 2-ounce, like shot of liquor combined with like soda or like tonic or something. This is not even considering the mixers that you may be obviously kind of drinking that with. So alcohol can in itself actually add up. As I told you guys about this Sunday where I literally had 2 mimosas, that's champagne and that's orange juice. So those are 2 things, and that racked up almost like 600 calories into like literally 2 like flutes that I didn't even feel like it, right? Was it fun? Sure. And I'm loving it and I've lived with it and that's perfect, but you need to be aware that that actually adds up a lot. And the fat is just simply because of the fact that if you're going to be consuming a higher carbohydrate meal, ideally you don't want to have like a higher carb, higher fat meal because it definitely racks up in overall calorie density. So try to make sure that you're cognizant of that as you kind of like approach these different meals. Now, should you track your calories? This is going to be a quick question during Thanksgiving. I always tell people that these are your goals, and I'm going to think about this as a dial of effort that you can kind of have in your process, okay? And that dial of effort can be like anywhere between 0 to 100%. A 100% like effort dial is going to be turned on all the way up. It's going to represent like you're tracking like, food, and you're making sure that you're creating awareness of what you're consuming every single day of the year. Now, I don't expect you guys to be perfect. I don't expect you guys to actually kind of have that level of effort because it's simply not sustainable. Do I track calories on Thanksgiving? I do not. Am I telling you to track calories around Thanksgiving? I am not telling you to do that. But if for you, because you want to have more control and because of the fact that it makes you feel more comfortable to understand exactly what you're consuming, I'm not going to tell you that you can't or that you shouldn't. It all depends on, these are my goals, this is what I'm willing to do, and this is obviously how far am I willing to go to be able to accomplish them. But at the same time, ask yourself the question, if this is what I'm willing to do and it's all the way turned up, like that dial of effort, it's 100%, can you sustain that for 3 to 6 months? And if the answer is yes, then by all means. If the answer is like, wow, like I don't even know, like then there's Christmas and all these different things, then simply turn it down a little bit. Your results may come a little bit, slower, but at the same time, there's more sustainable because you can enjoy life and you can enjoy the things that you're doing. So it all comes down to that. So keep that in mind as well. What happens if you blew it? What happens if you consume way too many calories and way too many different alcohol? So what to do? Number 1, please put this in your forehead somewhere, put it as a reminder. Do not stress out. Do not stress out. I think overall, I've been talking about for literally 30 minutes. You're not going to gain 10 pounds of fat over one single meal. So do not stress out. Number 1. Number 2, go back to your normal routines. People gain weight over the holidays because they stop doing the routines that got them the results in the first place because they think that one meal completely blew everything that they've accomplished, and that's not true. They look at the scale and it goes up and you're like, I might as well stop doing it all together. And I have proved this with all my clients throughout this most important time of the year, which is obviously the holidays, because they stop paying attention to what they're going to be doing after holiday meals or after parties or after things like that. Resume your routines, going back to your workouts, eat normally again, eat a lot in case obviously you're kind of having a good amount, do not restrict yourself. And that's it, obviously number 3, eat less, but not super restricted. Again, you can totally kind of create the deficit that we have been creating, you and I, in this entire process one-on-one, but you don't have to restrict yourself out of guilt. Keep that in mind. And number 4, resume your exercise routine exactly where you left it off. You don't have to do millions of hours of cardio. You don't have to do like extra workouts just to burn off all your calories from your meals. Simply resume what you were doing. Increase the amount of NEAT, walking, and all those different things. And even on the days that, I forgot to put this on here, on the days that you actually consume a ton of calories, if it was, for example, a lunch or a brunch or something like that, maybe add a walk after that. So to kind of like get your body to get moving a little bit more, or so like that, to increase the amount of calories your body's just burning in like non-exercise activity, like related, or non-exercise related activities. So for example, walking and moving and all those different things. Those things actually matter a ton. Okay. That's exactly how I navigate my, what's it called? Like my holidays. This is exactly how I've been teaching most people to actually do it. And remember also one thing, and I was kind of going back to like the whole thing, like the dial of effort versus like, how much exactly where you're at and all these different things. This is a time also in which, if you want to continue to make, let's say your goal is like continue to be fat lost, you can continue to work on it this way. Now, if you've been working at it for a while, there could be times in which you can actually be a little bit more lenient on it. And maybe the goal becomes something known as maintenance. And then this is a time in which you can actually kind of stay where you're at and be more comfortable about it. We're not in a hurry for anything on here. And I keep saying this, like we treat obviously like fat loss and losing weight and all these different things. Like we're like, God forbid that something's going to happen to us in like a month. No, it doesn't happen that way. Yes, there's obviously going to be weddings and parties in summer and like, big events and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, do you want to make sacrifices just so you can get the instant gratification of a body that you cannot hold on to for like 1 month? Or do you prefer to actually kind of like play the long game and keep the body that you have dreamed of, but it's going to happen maybe in, 1 year or whatever may be the case, but you can easily hold on to that and be fully 100% satisfied with it. Change takes time, and changes that you can hold on to are going to take even more time. So you just need to be aware of those different things. But just to avoid the ups and downs that many people experience throughout specifically this time, and why many people have this like massive New Year's resolutions, you need to start focusing on keeping the consistency of everything that you have built and everything you've been working on so hard. So, and there's a few of you guys in here. Some of you guys have been working with me for like, 4 or 5 months. Some of you guys literally just started working with me. It doesn't matter. Okay. Like whatever kind of like place and point and exactly where you're at, it's important for you to build the consistency, that's going to help you actually accomplish the long-term results. So what are some of your key takeaways? You're more than welcome to unmute yourself, or you can totally actually put your stuff on the chat box before we wrap it up. I literally want to hear one takeaway from this conversation. I'm literally going to start calling people out. So Katie, you're going to put in there your takeaway. Next, you're going to Maritza, you're going to put in there your takeaway. Leandro, I know you're here too. You're going to put your takeaway, and then Betsy, and then somebody called iPhone also just join in. So I'm guessing if you just join in for this, you may have missed a lot of it, but we recorded it, so it's perfect. Maritza, one butt meal does not ruin months of progress. Yes, love that one. I love it. Great. Katie, what you got? Leandro, Betsy. Sorry, let me throw in some stuff on here. Focus on protein and fiber throughout the day before the meal at night. Yes, very, very good. And those things can be, for example, like a nice little salad, lots of veggies, adding maybe some protein options, some protein sources or something, stuff like that. I sometimes like to even before I go into this big holiday meals or a big event or something like that, I sometimes have a protein bar and I have it right before I go. And you're like, why would you do that if you're just simply going to eat a meal? It's well, because it's good. It keeps me fuller longer. And I know, for example, that I'm probably going to be making better decisions. There's nothing worse than going into a place like starving or too hungry. If you don't believe me, when is the last time you went to a grocery store starving and you got only what you needed to get? Let's be honest. You got a lot more than stuff that you needed to get. So cool. All right, so I got Katie, Maritza. I'm still missing Betsy, whoever iPhone is, and then Leandro. So I just go back to normal routine after eating too much. Love it. That's great. And then I'm glad that I'm recording this. Drink a lot of water. Yes. Great. Love it. Good. Questions, comments, suggestions, concerns, anything else that I can kind of help you guys in here with today. This is great. I love talking about this stuff. Hopefully this was helpful. If it wasn't, also let me know. But anyways, we're going to wrap it up in here, guys. It's already at 7:45. I typically like to make this like 45 minutes. So of course, if you have any specific questions about this entire conversation, feel free to shoot me a message separately on Practice Better or via email, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. Katie, I'll get to your check-in today because I know I already saw that it came in today. So no worries. I'm already kind of like on top of that. Okay. Anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning in here today. I will talk to you guys probably in a month as far as like group accountability calls. And if not, obviously in your check-ins or on our calls. Take care. Have a wonderful night, guys.